Welcome to Manthan once again, friends. Today we are going to talk about a few more contradictions. Not so much a contradiction, but anomaly in itself. The first anomaly is the anomaly of the hot corona. So when you have a sun's temperature, when you have a sun's surface, the surface is seen to be existing at 5500 degrees centigrade, whereas the coronal volume, the surface beyond the sun's surface or the immediate vicinity, is nearly over 1,000,000 degrees centigrade. And why is that an anomaly? Any heat source that you take, the farther you move away from the heat source, the temperature reduces. Of course, it is the same with sun also, but it is just in the near vicinity of the sun, in the coronal volume, the temperature is shooting up to 1,000,000 degrees centigrade. And that happens to be an anomaly because that is not the way a heat source is supposed to behave. The closer you are, the temperature increases, the farther you are, the temperature decreases. So the coronal volume, there is no reason why there should be such a spurt of temperature. So what does the classical model of universe say? The reason that they attribute to this 1,000,000 degrees centigrade is because of the solar flares. These flares are basically sudden burst of radiation, how should we say, a release of magnetic energy. It may be very astronomical temperature increase, no doubt about it, but the drawback of this particular theory is that there should be a correlation between the effect and the cause. If the effect is uniform temperature and consistent temperature, even the cause which is causing that effect also should be uniform and consistent. What we see in these solar flares is that they are non-uniform and they are temporary in nature. In the sense, they do occur all over the surface of the sun, but they are never ever uniform. So what is happening here in the corona is the continuous cooking of corona. So as you know, in any kind of cooking activity, what you need is, one is a heat source, and there should be a lid or an impediment. What I mean by lid or impediment is the fact that if there was nothing to stop that energy which is releasing from sun, there was no reason why this temperature should pop up, go up to 1,000,000 degrees centigrade. The fact that it is going up to 1,000,000 degrees centigrade does say that the energy is being, how should we say, pushed back. There is a kind of a lid. But the only issue with the lid is this lid cannot be a continuous lid. If that is the case, then you would have overcooking of sun and it would burst in a way. So what we want is a lid or an impediment which can bring this energy or hold that energy back in that coronal volume, even if for a temporary time, but it should be porous in nature. It should also allow the energy to radiate or come out of the surface. Now let us see how does Manthan model help us explain. To begin with, let us summarize what Manthan model is. In Manthan model, we say that the gravity does not exist. That the mass does not have, it's not in the business of mass to attract another mass. So for that to discount gravity altogether, you need to have a force which is external to the mass, because there is a measured value. Measured value is that the masses are coming together. We are standing on the earth. So there should be a force which is keeping us grounded or making these two masses come together. So when we are saying that this force is external to the mass, you will have to prove that the outer space has got positive pressure. But we know that the outer space we consider as vacuum, no matter whatsoever, and hence no pressure. So it is very important for us to prove that the outer space is a positive pressure. We did that by taking an analogy of any fluid, just the way you consider the intermolecular space between the molecules as vacuum, but still you consider the entire system existing at a positive pressure P. In the same way, we should not consider the outer space vacuum at absolute zero pressure, because when you expand that horizon of that vacuum, what you come across is moon, other planets, solar system, galaxies, and hence you should consider this universe as a system, just the way you consider this fluid at a positive pressure. Even the universe also should be considered as a positive pressure. If you really want to reach an absolute zero pressure, just the way you remove all these molecules to reach vacuum, you also should be able to remove all these masses one by one, all the galaxies, all the Milky Way, all the solar systems, and reach a stage of nothingness, and that is where possibly there could be a absolute zero pressure. But otherwise, as it exists, the universe, as long as there is mass in the universe, there is positive pressure, and this pressure is kg per square meter, and obviously whenever there is a pressure, there is a force which is kg, which is acting on these two masses, acting on these two forces externally. And when these external force is the reason for these two masses to come together, which is the measured value, it can either be because of gravity or spacity. So since we have proved that the vacuum, outer space vacuum is not absolute zero pressure, but it is a positive space pressure, we have proved that the spacity exists and that gravity does not exist. Now, obviously, when it comes to gravity, we say that the attractional force of masses is just the nature of the mass itself. The mass exists, there will have to be gravity. We cannot say the same thing to spacity. We try to find out why does this space, what is the business of this space to bring these two masses together. And that is when we proposed, we saw how space interacts with other elements of the universe, and if you consider this as a universe, anything that is beyond the universe is nothingness. So in a way, this universe is existing in a cocoon of nothingness. Nothingness is zero. In fact, the truly infinite factor in the whole of existence is nothingness. So that is why to understand infinity, you should know that the key to reasoning of infinity is in nothingness. So nothingness has the capacity to handle infinity. It can create infinity, it can subsume infinity. 1 by 0 is equal to infinity and 1 by infinity is equal to 0. And when you reduce these basic constituents of the space, you see that it will be space, time and energy. In the sense, you take any other form of anything that you see existing in this universe, it will have to be put in one of these bins, either energy, space or time. And among these three, energy is the first among equals, because without energy, space and time cannot exist. But as you can see, of course, the energy of the total system always remains same. It is just that it transfers between space, time and energy from the pure energy. As time grows, the space also grows at the expense of energy, but the total energy of the whole system remains the same. When we see that space in a way is having a negative effect on all other elements of the universe, you take matter, light, whatever it is, as we have seen in our earlier video blogs, space always has a negative effect on all forms of energy. That is as though there is an eternal tussle between space and energy happening. And why does that happen? And that is how we propose the Manthan cycle. It is as though space is trying to put the energy which has escaped from nothingness at Big Bang, it is trying to put it back into nothingness. So what we understand from here is that the mandate of spacity is to act on every form of energy. Mass being another form of energy, space is also acting on every mass. How does it act on every mass? It acts in different ways, basically primarily in three ways, as we call it as S1, S2 and S3. Depends on the condition of the mass that is in. S1 in case if it is just one mass in the universe, if there are two masses under consideration or more than two masses. When you have just one mass in the universe, the idea of the space is to because ultimately when the space is trying to bring back the energy back into nothingness, it will have to contract the whole universe. The whole contraction of this universe would involve reduction of volume, and obviously for that it needs to bring all the mass together. And when it is bringing the mass together, ultimately it has to act on it. And that is what S1 is acting here, which is a holding pressure. It is acting uniformly on every square millimeter or square inch of the surface of the mass. And this S1 is directly proportional to the mass that it is acting on. It does not add any kinetic energy because there is no differential movement, because the pressure is equal and acting on everything. It is going to crush, but it cannot move. And this S1 is highest at the surface of the mass, because as you move away from the surface of the mass for a given volume, the density always is decreasing. So as you move away from the mass, the pressure or the spacity will reduce. As you move towards the mass, the given density in a particular volume keeps on increasing, and that is highest when you reach the surface of the mass, and hence it is the highest on the surface. That is about a holding pressure, which is S1. Second is S2, where you have two masses. Obviously S1 is acting on each of these masses independently, but beyond that, as we had seen from the mandate of the space, it is supposed to bring the masses together. The external force, the measured value of bringing these two masses together, is from the mandate of the spacity. For that, S2 is acting. This is very similar to the gravity that we have learned, and this obviously the magnitude is directly proportional to the masses that it is acting on, and inversely the influence is inversely proportional to the distance that these masses are separated in. And S2 is obviously imparting kinetic energy to the masses. And the third system is when these masses are in motion. As we had seen during our earlier video blocks, spacity is not the reason why these masses are moving. Masses are moving, as we had studied during galaxy formation, the electric discharge, the galaxy formation, the masses start moving. It's only when the masses start moving, S3 comes into picture. Why? When the masses are in motion, the general tendency of the masses or the constituents of the system is to leave the system. And that is against the mandate of spacity. Space has to keep these masses within that system. So it will have to act only when the masses start moving. And that doesn't mean that the masses cannot breach the space, but it has to spend the energy. Now, how does this S3 act? And now you have S1 and S2, then the only way S3 can act is in the general direction of the motion in that particular orbit. And again, in that it has two options, either to act in the direction of the motion or against. Let us assume it is acting against the direction of the motion. In that case, all the masses will leave the system and the very mandate of space will be defeated. So it cannot act against the direction of the motion, it will have to act along the direction of the motion. And this S3 is a accumulation of all the small S3s which are acting on each of the mass. And what we see that is a accumulation of all these S3s. And this S3 is directly proportional to the cumulative mass in that particular circumference. In the sense, in this particular circumference or the orbit, you add a few more masses, S3 increases. You remove masses, S3 decreases. This is how we proved that the dark matter in the galaxy is a notion which can be discounted for. Now this is what S1, S2, S3 is, and let us try and see how S1, S2 and S3 can help us explain the anomaly. S2 and S3 are of no relevance to us when we are trying to understand why the corona is hot, because it is more than one mass. So what is most important is pressure S1 itself, which is a moving pressure, which is a holding pressure S1, and it is acting uniformly on all the surface of the mass, any mass, irrespective of whether it is Earth, Moon or surface, a small pebble, everything is being acted upon by space. Now what you have is the Sun. Every square millimeter or square inch of that surface is being acted upon from outside by this S1. So what we wanted of course, was a lid which could keep this energy which was radiating outside temporarily held on inside the coronal volume. And we didn't want this lid to be, or impediment to be, continuous, otherwise the sun would be overcooked. The best part of S1 is that it is not continuous, it is space, it is allowing, if you can spend energy, you can come out of the coronal volume. So this is a best way to explain the temperature which is shooting up to 1,000,000 degrees centigrade, because you're putting a lid on the surface of the sun. At the same time, you are allowing the energy to get dissipated. Even if it is holding that energy for a temporary period of time, it is increasing the temperature. And it is not just over a period of 1 year or 2 years. We are talking about a millennia, 4 billion years of existence of sun. Obviously, this temperature is going to get cooked and reach. And that is what we see now as 1,000,000 degrees centigrade. So the basic thing is, in the classical model of universe, there was nothing to hold this energy back. It's only when you consider the mandate of spacity, it is the space which is acting on every surface, every mass, which is holding that energy back. And hence, we can say that the energy, though it is moving out, it is being held in the coronal volume and being the reason for shooting of this hot corona.